Nothing in creation rests. Everything you hear, taste, smell, feel, and see vibrates. Just look around you. Every given area contains vibration at its own frequency, and it does not interfere with other frequencies as beams of light. The natural mood of vibration ranges from very high and fast to very low and slow frequencies. That means that some things, like high frequency vibration of sound, can vibrate so high that you cannot hear it. It does not mean that the sound is gone. It simply means that you cannot hear it. There are also sounds that are so low in frequencies of vibration that you also are unable to hear it. This reality tells us that at both extremes of sound, whether high or low, you are limited to its perception. This same phenomenon also extends to vision. The human eye detects the visible spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is a range of wavelength between 400 to 700 nanometers. Every other wavelength of light outside of this visible spectrum is considered invisible to the human eye, primarily because it cannot activate photoreceptors in your eyes, allowing you to see it. So, the wavelength of light is also still there, but again, you are unable to see it. With this actual fact in mind, it stands to reason that there are states of existence that are beyond human comprehension. Very few are aware, and even smaller groups are able to achieve access to the ethereal levels of their physical senses in order to detect higher planes of existence. Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. I'm fearless. Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in. So, why can't you detect it? Well, because you forgot you were more than a human being. You forgot that your real self is not the body. You forgot that your real self is independent of the body which it inhabits. You forgot that your real self is even independent of the mechanism of the mind, which it uses as an instrument. You forgot that your real self is a drop from the divine ocean of all and is eternal and indestructible, meaning it cannot die or be annihilated. And no matter what becomes of the physical body, your real self will still exist in various moods and vibration. That is why people believe in life after death. And since we all were given life into this physical material plane, then we must have come from somewhere else prior to our physical manifestation. We are all but a thought in the mind of the all, in all. You see, a thought is a concept that eventually became a conception, and thus from all you grew into existence, or were born as a physical manifestation of etheric beings as humans. Now, since energy cannot be destroyed, it stands to reason that after the physical body expires, your etheric or spiritual body will inevitably return back to that state of existence from which it came. So, in fact, there is existence before creation of the material or physical plane in which we now dwell. So, where do they exist, you may be wondering? And the answer that is hard for you to understand due to human limitation is that they are all right here. And as paradoxical as that may sound to the limited intellect, in order to perceive these higher realms, you must understand that existence vibrates, which determines density as matter or antimatter or ether that distinguishes different levels of energy that manifest as life. Now, with that understood, we should be able to reason that all forms of life are the same. It's a matter of what density level they are on, which are simply vibration levels on the physical plane. Density is the quality of being close or compact. Take your hair and nails for instance. Both are made of the same substance called keratin. However, the different density levels that each are on makes them appear differently. So in fact, all cells are the same, and if it appears differently, it has only changed in modes of vibration and thus moving into higher or lower levels of energy. This physical plane in which we now dwell is no different. This plane is partly made up of solids, liquids, and gases. Most modern scientists have limited the physical plane to these three states, which in fact, there are many more states of being within the physical plane. Now, if you feel that everything that exists only exists on the physical plane, then you are sadly mistaken. For the material or physical plane is the plane with the densest form of matter, which can be subdivided into different forms of matter based on the motion of the electrons, protons, and nucleus of the atom. This actual fact renders the material plane the lowest plane detectable in existence. There are 9 planes of existence that correlates with the 9 seats in your body and your 9 senses. 9 in anything is the highest, for there is no number higher than 9. Any number thought to be above 9 are really compound figures, meaning 11 is a compound of 2 ones, and 12 is a compound of a 1 and 2. That's all. These 9 planes that I speak of are simply distinct and intricate modes of vibration woven into one another so uniquely that one cannot determine where one plane begins and another plane ends. The reason this happens is because vibrational levels are capable of occupying the same space at the same time. Thus, all the planes of existence are right here, differentiated by modes of vibrational level subdivided. Thus, it's not a matter of where these planes exist, it's a matter of fact that they exist. And just as you have so-called governors of the physical realm, there are also etheric beings that governs all the various modes of vibration, including this meager physical plane. Now, everything that is alive must be stimulated by something else for it to function. Take your cell phone for instance. In order for it to work, it needs some form of charge, which is the power that makes it work. Well, your physical life is no exception. In order for you to be alive, something else must exist as the charge or vital force that makes life possible. For instance, what we inhale, trees exhale, and what we exhale, trees inhale. The plants take in water through the roots and carbon dioxide from the air. With the energy from the sun, they are able to perform photosynthesis to make glucose and oxygen. Now, while the plant uses the glucose as food to grow, the oxygen is a byproduct that we use to breathe. This interdependent relationship between humans, animals, and nature is made possible by way of the energy supply, without which the denser part of you would not be able to live. Your body and the energies that make life possible are directed and controlled by what the ancients refer to as the plane of force. The plane of force, which is the second plane, is the energy plane where the ultrafine ethers penetrate the higher regions of the physical plane. Meaning, it is the result of what you detect with your physical senses, and thus it is all around you, and it is as much a part of you as the physical plane is. However, your senses are not conditioned enough for you to detect it. The plane of force and the material plane works together in perfect harmony, carrying out the cycles of nature devotedly and so perfect each year. This plane is largely composed of etheric duplicates. That is to say that everything in the physical realm has an etheric counterpart in energy form. Being that this is the energy realm, it consists of ordinary forms of energy like heat, light, attraction, and electricity, as well as those forms of energy that are finer, which gives human beings and nature its vitality. That is the ability to grow and reproduce. This vital life force, which sets life on the physical into motion, is called Sekhem to us ancient Egyptian, also known as prana to the Hindus and nefesh to the Hebrews. Every action and reaction of growth and reproduction is a result from Sekhem. This vital life force harmonizes the entire life of the human being and nature because it is constant of rhythmic pulsation in nature known to you as seasons. So you can see that the plane of force is perfectly woven into all matter on the material plane. On the plane of force, matter is not solid, liquid, or gas as you understand it on the material plane. How? Because they are more refined because of its vibration at a much higher speed. The mother of matter is nature, and nature is a result of the plane of force. Since nature is a result of the plane of force, we can conclude that on the plane of force, there is no distance, no temperature, no seasons, no days or nights, and therefore no time. For all of these are the result of the plane of force, manifested in the physical plane. The word nature etymologically means to give birth, or to be born, from the ancient Egyptian word neteru. The life force in the waters and the sun and the minor particles of living energy is the plane of force. Now, since planes have no spatial distinction of degrees, each plane blends into the other, overlapping, therefore having a common area of space. So, once you vibrate above the plane of force, you move towards the etheric state or exoplasma, known as the spiritual plane, which is the third of the 9 planes. also called the astral plane. On the spiritual plane, we discover we have another set of senses, which are merely the counterpart of our physical senses, both of which are 9. Refer to my video, Higher Senses. These spiritual senses function on the spiritual plane with the spiritual body, just as our physical senses do on the material plane with the physical body. The spiritual body and senses are attached to our physical form by a very thin cobweb-like etheric cord, invisible to the naked eye. This is also the plane by which contact with someone who have died or translated and is residing on the spiritual plane may be made. Upon reaching the spiritual plane, according to your deeds, it is determined whether or not you proceed or recycle into incarnation. Now, how do we know the spiritual plane exists? Well, at one time, scientists could not explain spiritual matters until of recent when they split the hydrogen atom. You see, it was taught that the hydrogen atom has a weight of 1, and when they split it, they found that it was composed of subatomic particles such as quarks. Now, these subatomic particles are a second degree of the atom, which does not have a weight. This is significant because existence is to exist, and to exist is to have a sum or a weight or mass, and these quarks have neither, just as spiritual matters. This discovery of quarks was a blatant admittance that there is a form of living intelligence and force that have no sum on this physical side of things, and thus this verifies the spiritual plane. What? But ignorant scientists refuse to admit that it's the spiritual, for they believe that you cannot contact or communicate with it. What fools these mortals be. We ancients have been doing just that for thousands of years, way before religious mythology was forced upon us, cutting us off our direct link to it. Above the spiritual plane is the 4th realm or density called the mental plane. Why the mental? Well, because these subatomic particles are so intelligent that it invaded your body to become you. Just think about that for a second and then ask yourself, who came first, you or your chromosomes? Now, if you're honest, you would say your chromosomes, which are in turn made up of atoms, which are made up of subatomic particles, which are all in, around, and through each and every one of us. The fact that you are made up of these intelligent bacteria, which are made up of particles, means that it can think, and therefore it is conscious. And if it's conscious, then it must have a mind. Booyah! The double-slit experiment conducted by modern physicists confirmed this very ancient Egyptian reality, where the observation of quantum phenomenon can change the behavior of its particles to waves. This means that particles do in fact think, reason, and react, which therefore means that it has a mind. And the word mind is the individual portion that feeds off the mental. And the mental is the reservoir of outtellect, the source from which the mind is fed intellect. This gives rise to the reality that even the soul and the spirit has a thought pattern. So the mental plane is a total state of mind where thoughts are formed, which is shared with every living thing. When you're able to vibrate on this plane, there are no longer a question about your destination. At this point, you will know that you're on the right path. All forms of low individuality are dissolved, and you no longer suffer petty vices such as fulfilling any actions for or against yourself because there is no self. You finally realize that ultimate bliss is divine love, for there is no longer separate individual ideas to separate. There are no longer any differences. You cannot even determine same because same is what makes a difference. I hope you got that. On this plane, you are guided and prepared by etheric beings that governs this realm for the final stage of the journey through the planes. While we so often refer to the 4th plane as the plane where man and mind meets. To understand this plane even further, refer to my video, Sacred Geometry. When you vibrate higher past the mental plane, you reach the 5th plane called Divine Truth. Here is where you learn to understand that truth is not always reality. Just as when scientists used to say that the hydrogen was the lightest atom, and it was true for a time, but now we know that it is not a reality. Nevertheless, it was accepted and believed during the period when they did not have the necessary intelligence to find out that it was not true. This thought process extends to everyone. That is why many people say things today like, "This is who I am," and this is my truth, but fail to realize that your truth is not always reality. So, as you vibrate even higher, you enter the sixth plane, called divine reality. Now, since the plane of truth is what you think you are, and what you want others to think about you, it can be subjective. Therefore, there must be a reality of who you really are. And the answer to that question manifests itself only to you and nobody else. That's why we teach that you can lie to all others, but you cannot lie to yourself. The plane of divine reality is the threshold of God. As you vibrate higher, you then enter the seventh plane, called the bosom of the Most High. And the word bosom is from the German word Busen, which means to grow. So, you grew through vibration from the previous planes to the abode of God where no lies can enter, for everything there is a reality. As you vibrate to the eighth plane, which is another degree of reality, and step from the bosom of God and look back to the previous planes, you're looking through the face of God, or from what we call the mask of God. And you now have questions about God's origin. And the only reason you're questioning that reality is because you're now wearing the mask of God. You see, God is a mask, a covering of a substantial reality we call the all in all. That merely means if you take a religious book like the Bible or Quran and look at the characters like Jesus and Moses and Aaron, the fact that they are all characters in a book, we cannot ignore the fact that the author of the entire book also exists within each of those characters, giving them their vitality, their spirits, and their action. And just who is the spirit of the characters in the scriptures? Is not the ghostwriter of these scriptures God, Jehovah, or Allah? And if this is true, and it is true for most people, we can conclude that the creator or God is immanent within its creation, making its creation an aspect of God as well. So, you should now be able to reason why we call it the mask of God. And when you wear that mask of God, you become a God. That is to say, responsible. With this right knowledge, you are able to respond to the needs of humanity. And when you are capable of responding to the needs of humanity, that means to help people, you are then a God. Now, through these planes, you are working your way towards this mask. And when you get there, you put that mask on and you look back at creation and all you see is growth. The only real reality, the only real consistency is growth, which is change that keeps occurring. That is why we say anything that does not change is dead. Above the eighth plane is the perfect cycle, the ninth plane, where all realities meet. That is why we taught that 9 is a number where all of its multiples have a sum of itself. This shows you that 9 moves in cycles. And once you get here, reality is gone. That means the quarks, the spirit, the soul is all gone. And the higher purpose manifests itself as naught, or simply the state of non-existence. Because the 10th plane does not exist. For 10 is a composite figure of 1 and 0, which takes you back to 1, which is aught or something. And from number 1, you move to another dimension, starting 9 more planes that is made up of energies, unlike the energies from the previous planes. And that's why modern scientists refer to this as antimatter. Antimatter is defined as matter composed of the antiparticle of the corresponding particles in ordinary matter. In other words, matter which is on the flip side of ordinary matter. The fact that scientists can perceive antimatter by atom smashing is confirmation that we are somewhere beside it, meaning we are somewhere beside the next 9 planes. By reasoning, antimatter must be on the outside of matter than what we know. So on the other side of hydrogen, there is anti-hydrogen. On the other side of spirit, there is evil spirits. On the other side of helium, there is anti-helium. And on the other side of good, there is bad. And then we start our next cycle upward. But change inevitably stays consistent. The only thing that is definite, the only thing that is constant and sure is change, be it good or evil. These are the planes of existence. I'm KHAFRE and this is Back to the Basic. Like, share, and subscribe.
retarded.
Facts we stated. You wanna know something? Go back to basics. Most saw trapping was called the Matrix. The world fibrilized, yet it's hard to face it. So I spread truth, hope you embrace it.